Hello, everybody. This is Jake Stanzano, host of the Jake and Gino podcast with my co-host, the multifamily mentor, the coach, chef, the father, six, the best-selling author, the G-Daddy. Gino Barbo. Gino, how's it going?
Jake, I'm doing very good today. Jake, how you doing, bro?
Always making it happen, big man. Today's guest is the best-selling author of Don't Feed the Elephants. She works with entrepreneurs to help them spot patterns that are keeping them from achieving a higher level of performance and develop more powerful partnerships. So without further ado, Sarah Noll Wilson, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
It is our pleasure. Let's get this started. Tell us how you got your start in business.
I didn't get my start in business. I was a theater education major, and I moved to Des Moines, Iowa. And I always lovingly say I chased a boy and that worked out, and we've been married for a while, but I did what every good person in Des Moines does. I got a job in insurance. And that's where I got my exposure to the corporate world, which wasn't what I grew up with. I come from a union truck driving family. And it was in that space that I started to become really interested in the dynamic of people who are in positions of power and those management positions. And not only how do they impact the business, but how do they impact the people who are driving the business? So that was my start in my journey. And then the evolution to owning my own company now.
Sarah, after the podcast, I'll sing a little opera to you right now. Maybe
no.
On camera, but
do you?
I don't absolutely. Sing. Okay. For theater, singing, dancing.
You have to stop this. You did get a start in business. You were in theater. I know you could sing a little bit. Come on, you're putting up too many roadblocks here.
Musical theater is a whole different beast, and I wish I could. I could. I play instruments, but I'm not with my voice.
Gotcha.
Don't Feed the Elephants. You wrote the book. Why did you write the book?
I wrote the book as a love letter for my fellow avoiders of conflict. Quite a few years ago, I was introduced to the idea of the elephant in the room, right? This was a concept I'd kind of been familiar with. And I had this very real epiphany that I had never experienced a team. And I also had never experienced relationships where we could talk about the hard stuff. And part of that was I realized that I didn't know how to talk about the hard stuff. Growing up in the Midwest, that we're very much, it's Midwest nice, right? We keep things at peace, which I, talk about, that it's more like violent politeness, And so on my journey of trying to figure out how do we actually create the teams where we can talk about the hard stuff, and not in a way that's aggressive, but in a way that's productive, right? Like we were talking before we jumped on, to really be able to solve the issues that we need to be able to solve as a group. And just got real curious about that avoidance piece. Why do we avoid? How do we name it? How do we overcome it?
Looking at different personality types, I don't know if you got into any research with that, but I'm just wondering, I forget which one it is, it's DISC or something like that, but the I's tend to be big time people pleasers. And I'm wondering if there's any connection, and if you had any research on this, with personality traits, because I think the people that are seeking to serve and want to be those people pleasers probably struggle with this the most. Is that fair to say? Do you have anything to back that up?
Yeah, so I would look at it more through the lens of the Big Five personality profile, which is sort of the kind of accepted one by most psychologists. Mm-hmm. And one of the continuums is the degree of agreement, like how much do we defer to people, right? So some of us fall in a low agreement. We're not afraid to fight for our ideas. We're not afraid of conflict, perhaps. And then on the other end, there are people who are high agreeable, right? They're more likely to defer. They're more likely to kind of go with the flow that's more comfortable for them. And so while I haven't done the research to correlate that, we know that the pattern is that people who tend to be more agreeable may be more likely to defer and potentially avoid the conflict. But I've worked with people who I would describe as, highly extroverted. I would describe as, high originality. And because the avoidance can come from a whole host of things. It can come from our culture. It can come from how we were raised. If we experience trauma, right? And speaking up and speaking out. And so there's a whole variety of things, but certainly my hypothesis would be that if you tend to be more agreeable, it may be easier for you to avoid the conversation than it is to have it.
First thing that popped into my head when you said that. Yeah.
What does the elephant in the room mean though? What does that mean?
The way that we describe it, just as a way, again, for people to engage with it differently, is sometimes when the elephant is talked about, it's talked about as if it's a person, like, oh, Gino, we got an elephant in the room over here and we're pointing at our boss. And there may be a conflict there. There may be some negative impact that you're having. But the elephant ultimately gets created when we avoid acknowledging or addressing, whether it's with ourselves or other people. Because like, for example, Jake, if you have an issue with me, or if I do something that's harmful and you bring it up to me and we have a conversation, then there's no elephant there. And so that was something that I was really interested in, of how do we define it in a way, or how do we understand it, which then led to the title of how do we not feed the elephant? How do we either keep it from coming into the room, or notice when it's there and get rid of it as quickly as possible?
Yeah, because even acknowledging that, oh, the elephant, like you're building it up to be more than it is and giving it powers that it doesn't need to have if you can just address it and speak about it and move on.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes we might be able to free the elephant, right? But not necessarily resolve our conflict. I like to think of those as two separate things. We have a conflict, something's difficult, there's a barrier to our success, and that we're not talking about it. That's actually what creates the elephant, right? And yeah, I mean, we were talking before we hopped on about teams that are most successful are psychologically safe, and they're ones where we can talk about the hard stuff and we can ask tough questions and we can be our authentic self. And so that's part of why this work is so important.
So by not feeding it, you're essentially killing it.
Well, that feels really aggressive.
It's like it's like a slow death. You kill the elephant by not feeding it, right?
He does things big. You know what I'm saying? He sneezes big. He runs through walls. He's killing elephants now. I mean, anything else here?
Yeah, no. I mean, just
I was looking at the title. That's all. I was like, well, if you don't feed it, you're not making it a fat elephant. You're basically putting it on a slow, path to death here. So, anyways,
it's a fair point and a fair criticism for how I like play with the metaphor. I just don't want to bring it into the room anyway. I always joke with groups like, because a lot of times people will be like, well, you just got to call it out. And sometimes you do. And sometimes using language like that, if there's an elephant in the room, that tells me there's already some emotional heat and there's some emotional discomfort.
Definitely. Yeah.
And so like, let's be really thoughtful about the language we use. It's like, what do we need to do to free the elephant right now is a way for us to deregulate some of that high intense. Because if I'm dysregulated and I'm using language that's continuing to amp me up, the likelihood that we're going to have an effective and successful conversation becomes far, far less likely.
So you just said something that triggered me right now, and not in a bad or good way, but in a way that we all want to be comfortable. I mean, that's the problem why people are not successful nowadays. Generations ago, just to go to the bathroom or to collect water, you'd have to walk 5 miles, or go to school. You'd have to nowadays, you just sit down and you're just really comfortable. So if you translate that into a relationship or into a social setting, or people don't want to get uncomfortable. Is this one of the reasons that really helps create or perpetuate that elephant in the room?
I think that, I mean, I would say one of the number one questions I get asked by people is how do I get more comfortable with this? And I'm really careful to say it may never be easy.
You just said no pain, no gain.
Easier. Yeah, well, and also like if you are somebody with whom I respect or I have a good relationship with and I want to protect, potentially talking about something that might run the risk of harming that relationship, that's a real risk. And that shouldn't, I think that if something is important to me and if that relationship is important to me, then I don't know that I want it to be an easy conversation. I want it to be an important conversation. And so that's part of that practice is realizing that our self-efficacy is like, it's temporary. This discomfort is temporary. And how do we sit with it and be okay with it to say, yeah, we're going to both step into the heat together, and it may not feel comfortable and it may be messy, but we're actually going to move out of it together, hopefully, and be better for it.
You will never go out of business, because what's going on in society right now, people wear a red hat and they get this uncomfortable. You alienate yourself, or you put yourself in a certain political party, and you can't have those conversations. People just shut each other off, and it's so much easier on Facebook. How do you overcome that? I mean, what do you need to do as a family? You're getting together for Thanksgiving. Let's discuss politics. I vote for A, you vote for B. How do we get together and have a disagreement amongst them, that you calling me a name or I myself calling you a name? How do we do that?
Yeah, I mean, that's complicated, because especially over the last couple of years, because of the isolation we've experienced, we've been able to sort of stay in our echo chambers, right? And being reinforced by that.
Yeah,
and so
true.
And then, if we're only communicating through social media, again, like we were talking about beforehand, it becomes easier to be like right or wrong. Now, at the end of the day, each person decides the values that they're willing to compromise on and the values that are like non-negotiables. But the reality is that we do have to figure out how do we How do we have conversations? How do we talk to each other? How do we get curious with each other? Because part of it is, now I will say, like, if somebody does something harmful to you, I'm not going to ask you to get curious about them, right? Like, that's a different situation. But the reality
like, what if
is
something harmful? Like, what do you mean?
I don't know, like, you overtly harass me if you do something
like don't stay in, like, if
me.
someone's like being abusive to you,
verbally
right?
abusive, exactly.
Like, or it crosses a line that's inappropriate. I mean, this is what's challenging,
Yeah.
is that we don't get to decide that line for people, right? Like, that's part of what adds to the complexity, is we don't get to decide that. But
what about the fact, though, hold on just one second, I just want to stay with this for a second, because it's interesting what you said a minute ago, because a lot of people are debating, discussing, yelling at each other even on social media, but they're not entering a true arena of in-person contact. So if they're constantly in their own little bubble in the basement debating somebody on the laptop, when they get in front of somebody in person, they've gotten so accustomed to communicating through this ether, this platform, that they probably suffer because their actual in-person discussion has grown weak through lack of use, and they're used to you being isolated and not having to actually respond to somebody, so they actually are suffering in their skills and capabilities to hold an in-person conversation, and it may not, because we're isolating ourselves into these little iPhone worlds and things.
I mean, I joke about this, but I think there's some truth that we know.
I think it's almost like a little scary in a way. Like
it is. No, I'll explain what I'm joking. I'm not joking about that, for sure.
Yeah.
But, like, we know that physically we've become very deconditioned over the last 2 years because we haven't been moving as much. And I think socially we've become deconditioned too, right?
Yes.
Like, our ability to repair relationships, I definitely think there's an amazing opportunity for us. And it is a muscle. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's
I think that's where I was going with it. Yeah.
Yeah, completely agree with you, because I don't think the goal is that it will ever be easy, but how do we make it easier? And the other thing, when we talk about different, political perspectives, all of that, is it all makes sense to the person, and sometimes we can get into like a hyper judgmental state, but it's like, well, I don't have to agree with you to try to understand you. Right. That's okay. But to understand that the information you're pulling in makes sense to you and justifies your beliefs, just like the information I pull in makes sense to me. And when we talk about politics, it's complicated. It's not as simple as like fiscal responsibility anymore. Now we're getting into like safety and livelihoods and all of that. And there's no one solution to that. And we're in a really complicated time.
I would disagree on that. I think that there's always been those issues. I think we're just a little bit, I honestly think we've grown soft as just citizens in general. And I think we have an inability to your point, kind of discuss this stuff. And I think we also have a lack of desire to see things through the other person's lens. And you can call it self-awareness or whatever you want, but if you're truly trying to see something from someone else's perspective, it allows you to engage them in a reasonable conversation. And I think that's one of the biggest gaps or things that are lacking in common discord these days. I think there's a real opportunity for that to be, I don't know if it was ever there or brought back, because that may not be correct, but I think that's one of the limiting factors for sure.
Yeah. And we're also, more voices are being heard now in a way that wasn't before, right? Like, more people.
I don't know. And I would almost disagree with that too, because I feel like most of the stuff we're being heard comes from a marketing perspective of what people want us to hear. I think there's some large, companies at play that are pushing out messages, and then we kind of jump on the bandwagon as citizens and then carry on that message as little drum beaters for the bigger ideas that are being pushed to us. So I think there's a actual lack of original thoughts, and we're simply, joining the bandwagon of marketing messages that are being fed to us, and versus actually sitting back and thinking for ourselves. We're kind of regurgitating what's spoon fed to us based on how we align in our what we think are our ideologies.
I mean, that may be true in some situations. Yeah. I can also share that one of the things that I can tell you over the last couple of years is, especially with the pandemic, is people started to get real clear about what was important to them in a way that they just didn't even have the time before, right? So I think there's like, we're in a values clarification. Now, is that influenced potentially by like outside factors? It always has been, right? And again, I think
now more than ever, though, I guess is because we have so much access to so much, and I think it's more than ever being kind of controlled by a few sources, and because you see consistent messaging throughout the channel. So I don't know, it's something something to keep an eye on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, what's tricky about that is how do you separate
Yeah.
what is it that you really believe and know versus maybe like, because I identify with a group, this is what I'm like being repeatedly.
It's like groupthink, right? You got to kind of take a step back and even challenge things within your own, communities. And it's interesting too, because there was that whole great resignation thing that took place. You're saying people had more time to sit and think. And now there's already, I forget, they're already giving it a new label where people thought the grass was greener on the other side. They may have like job hopped or whatever. And now there's like this big regret thing going on because it didn't necessarily work out, or they didn't. It's a wild time. I think is at the end of the day, there's a lot of interesting things happening. I think a lot of it is led by tech and the rapid changes that are coming down to us, and the way our lives are being impacted and changed by it.
Yeah.
I think the great Stephen Covey, though, I think his quote is, people see things as they are, not as it is. And we all have our own paradigm.
They are individually, right? Is what you mean, Gino?
Yeah.
Because they are their perspective.
Exactly. Yeah. And when we first started out in multifamily in our real estate journey, well, it takes money to make money. So my paradigm was I needed to make money in real estate, when in reality and in business, you don't need money. You need ideas and you need solutions and you need to create value. Now I've known that. I've learned that over the last decade and a half to 15, 20 years, but I didn't know that in the beginning. I was seeing things from my perspective. But as you get older and as you get wiser, smart people learn from their mistakes. Wise people learn from others' mistakes. And I think that's the problem. I think people are seeing from their own perspective. They're not taking a broader perspective and seeing actually what's going on in society. And even, getting back to your book, it's the same thing. A true leader is there listening to everybody. He or she is the last person that speaks in the room and tries to get all of the information. And, Jake is looking at it from one perspective. He's trying to kill the elephant. I'm trying to keep the elephant from not coming in the room. Those are two different perspectives. I'm just saying, like, he's looking at it from that perspective. I may be looking at it from another perspective. And, then all of a sudden, if I am more secure, if I have much higher self-esteem, I'm there listening to him. I'm not there bashing him. I'm not there calling him names. I'm not there insulting him, as a lot of people have been doing over the last 2 years. I have enough confidence and self-esteem, and I know that my ideas are better than his. Why would I want to kill a little elephant? Why? I don't want to do that. I want to feed him little peanuts, or I don't even want to have him in the room. That's the power of it, I think.
Yeah. Well, and even using the language, right? We're really intentional with our words. We know that our words matter and our questions are faithful. So even us asking ourselves the question, what's my perspective and what's your perspective, is reminding us that we all are looking at, right? Like, it's kind of there's the old story, right? Like, one person's, to play on the elephant, one person's, feeling the trunk of the elephant and they're describing it in one way, and somebody's feeling the tail and they're describing it another way. And so somewhere between all of us there's a truth there. And why curiosity seems so easy on the surface. It's easy to be curious when things are convenient. It's easy to be curious when I agree with you. It's easy to be curious when, like, I'm familiar with the situation. But the reality is that there will always be things we don't know. There will always be things I don't know about myself. There will always be things I don't know about you. There will always be things I don't know about the situation. And it's damn hard sometimes, right? To get curious when I disagree, to get curious when maybe I feel threatened, or whatever the, feelings I have. But like that is where I find that incredible growth can happen, whether it's personal growth, whether it's relationship growth, and company growth, right? How do we, talk about companies and getting curious? Like, it's easy to be like, oh, this is the reason we're not, I don't know, like, doing well or whatever, but let's have a real, like, it's easy to say, oh, the reason that there's turnover is because people don't want to work. Well, that's a comfortable interpretation. A courageous interpretation and a curiosity is, what are the things we're doing or not doing that might be driving people away, right? Like that question is hard.
And the statement doesn't matter, because if you want to hire, right, it's not about, well, people just don't want to work. You need to figure out how you're going to actually get people motivated to work for you and be, join your team. The one is just a complaint and it's not going anywhere. It's a waste of time.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest word that we're talking about here, and we're sort of sidestepping it, is responsibility, everybody. If you're not responsible, you won't be curious. You won't want to put the work, because Jake is constantly saying that, when people don't take over their finances or whatever, or even their health situation, what's going on with COVID, they're just not being responsible, not putting in the work. They're putting it into other people's hands. And if you don't ultimately become responsible for your thoughts, the quality, what is the quote that Dr. Corcoran says? The quality of your life comes back to the quality of your decisions, really. And if you're not really becoming and be able to become responsible for your thoughts and put in the hard work. This is a lot of hard work. Be able to speak last and to listen to everybody. Listen, I have 6 kids. They wear you out, man. At the end of the day, it's like you listen to every single one of them. It's like, I am tired. My wife is we homeschool the kids. So can you imagine? They're never out of the house. They're here every day, all the time. It's Barbies at nighttime. It's sushi during the day. It's like, but if I don't sit there and I don't listen, I'm responsible for them. I'm responsible for their formation. If I'm not there putting in the hard work, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. And as a leader and as somebody trying to hire somebody, you need to be curious, but ultimately you need to take responsibility for every relationship that you have. So I think that's truly important, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, it's that accountability that, like, to play on that quote that you shared, that, right, I forget how you said it, but like, our success is like driven by our decisions, and our relationships are built by our conversations, right? And the conversations we engage. And we know that our success also personally, professionally, is so largely impacted by the relationships we have. Nobody does it alone. And we spend a lot of time on autopilot. I don't know what the stats are now. Meaning, in the pandemic and as we're navigating out of it, but pre-pandemic, we spent at least 50% of our day on pure autopilot. How we thought, how we responded, things we say. I always, like, you go past somebody in the break room and you say, how's your day? Living the dream. And you don't even stop to go, but now how are you really? And what am I actually feeling right now? And so that's part of that accountability, is to slow down enough to go, what's actually happening right now? And how do I want to show up in this moment versus how am I just showing up?
In the book, you talk about the amygdala and the brain. Let's talk about the amygdala, or the croc brain, and the stress responses, and how this actually ultimately affects the elephant in the room.
My favorite. Some people look through the world in rose-colored glasses. I look through amygdala glasses, which is kind of gross if you think about it, because it's an organ. But but the reality is that we move to a threat-based response, whether that's threats to our emotions, our physical, our ego, right? All of those things in 0.07 seconds. It happens before we're even conscious of it, right? It could be a way somebody looks at you. It could be a way you've interpreted the email. It could be a smell, whatever it is. And what happens is, when that amygdala hijacks, it floods our brain. It floods it with cortisol and adrenaline and noradrenaline, and we physically lose access to our ability to empathize, to think logically, to listen. This is why, when when we get married and they say, oh, don't go to bed mad. I'm actually a big advocate of going to bed mad, not in an unintentional way, in a very conscious way, because it actually takes 24 hours, like around 24 hours, for our body to fully metabolize those chemicals so that we can access those higher functioning parts of our brain. Which is why if you go to bed mad and you wake up the next day and you go, oh, I don't remember why we were so mad at each other last night, I feel very different. It isn't because you slept on it. It's because your brain physically has access to higher functioning levels of thinking, because we've had time to process those chemicals. And it's so important, because if we can recognize, because we can't stop that reaction. It happens too fast. Right? The goal, it's kind of like with feedback. Sarah, how do I give feedback so people don't, react? I'm like, you might not be able to. But the goal is, how do we notice it so that we can recover more quickly? So we can notice it's happening. So I can notice, ooh, you disagreed with me and that triggered something in me. Okay, I'm not going to go on that train. How do I shift so I can be present with you? Or to be able to say, hey, I need to chew on this. I'm not in the right headspace to have this conversation. Let's talk tomorrow when I've had some time to think about it.
The great Stephen Covey, once again, it's the stimulus and response. You have a stimulus, you have the ability to respond. We're one of the only animals on the planet that can actually sit there. And as you get older, you have to understand that there's no such thing as someone triggering you. You can only trigger yourself. You have the response. You're able to respond. You have to be conscious. Most of us are unconscious. As Sarah said, if you're going throughout your day 50% of the time, that's what happens. You're going to react and you're not really going to stop and think. That's the problem that's going on right now. We're not conscious of what our actions are. I would challenge everyone, if you're having issues with that, go to life coaching, become a life coach, and you will understand a lot of the tools that life coaches use to be able to ask yourself great questions. As Tony Robbins says, the better the questions you can ask yourself, the better the answers and the better life that you will have. I think that's really, really important. Jake, I got a couple questions for you.
I want to add something there, though, that's really, really important, because there's a yes and we know that when people experience trauma, it does change how their brain functions.
Mm-hmm.
It does change how they react to it. So that trigger response, it happens so fast. It fundamentally rewires the brain. So I hear you from the standpoint of how can we choose to show up? But what we know from like a neuroscience perspective is that reaction happens so fast. And if I've had experience with trauma or whatever, it's even faster, that I might not be able to catch it right away. But the practice, whether that's working with a coach or going to a great therapist, is how can I process it in a way to notice what's happening, right? To notice. And it's hard work. That's real hard work, but it's really important work, not just for other people, but for you, right? Like, just to serve you is really important.
Just bury it deep down and don't let it out.
What was that? You just keep it down. You just like bottle it in.
Hey, before Gino gets to his questions, I just want to bring this up. I think I might have your next business. Are you ready?
Woo.
Mm-hmm. We were like, this is good. We're recording it. Okay, give it to me.
We're recording it. Yeah, so it's all yours.
Yeah, no,
I don't take any credit. Go to bed mad diet.
No.
Burn more calories in your sleep by processing cortisol. Am I onto it or what? You can sleep your way to burning more calories.
Just get really angry, like talk about, some unresolved conflict that you've never resolved, because and also, this is,
go on Twitter, get triggered and go to sleep.
Right. And then just let your body process it. That would be really helpful. Short term, you might lose some weight. Long term, you might lose some years off your life.
Yeah.
But
that's just how my brain works. I'm sorry.
That's a good title of a book.
Jake, 2 questions real quick. This is how the amygdala works. What are the 3 basic human needs?
Food, clothing, and apartments.
That's right. Amygdala. That's sexy. That's exciting. If it don't cash flow, then
let the grass grow.
That's how it works. So if you're out there trying to raise capital, you're trying to be unique, different, you're pitching from your neocortex, which is your higher part of your brain. I'm talking to Jake, who's processing the croc brain. He's going to say, Gino, you're full of it. I don't believe you. Or that's exciting because the croc
killing
brain
elephants and crocodile time. That's what I get today, I guess. Whatever.
It's a whole menagerie of animals here.
You're out there, you're looking for movement. That's the croc brain's looking for, something unique, something different. And when I can present a deal to somebody in that perspective, he's going to look at it and go, food, clothing, and apartments. That's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That's basic. Oh, but you're putting apartments in there and you're investing. Oh, and by the way, inflation is, it's killing us. But as apartment owners, our rents are going up. You have to make it interesting to the croc brain or to the amygdala. And once you get past that, then you can start pitching your presentation, going into IRR and all those boring things. But you need to get past the gatekeeper before you can get to the neocortex or the higher brain.
Well, and let's talk about that, right? Like there's three different, trust is complicated and it's not, right? But we know there's 3 factors that fairly consistently impact trust, of whether I trust you to buy from you, whether I trust you to want to hire you, whether I trust you to want to build a relationship with you. Authenticity, are you who you say you are? Because we have real good BS meters of you say this, but then you show up like this. Empathy.
God, mine always goes through the roof. That's probably my biggest thing right there. It's
your bullshit meters go.
Oh, dude, I'm constantly telling Gina, I'm like, no, screw that person. I don't trust them at all. They're full of shit, right?
And it happens so fast, and maybe.
I'm like 15 seconds tops, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I'm done. I wrote them off.
Actually, it's probably even faster. What we know about that kind of reaction is it happens in the body way faster than our brain even catches it. Yeah. But we're so tuned into that, and then it's empathy and it's logic. Do you care about me? Do you have my best interest at heart? I know you're selling to me and you have, but I've been sold to and it's felt gross, and I've been sold to and I felt wow, you've really invested in my success and what I need, and that feels good. So now I trust you.
I want to buy.
I hate the gross sales.
Don't want to be sold. So yes.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Last question before we go to the short answers. In the book you wrote, people don't fear change. They fear loss. You really have to dive into this, because this is the crux of what everyone is not going to get into their first deal. And it's funny because getting into your first deal, you're scared. It took us 18 months to get our first deal. I felt like throwing up the night before.
Sure.
Jake, we're going to collect the rents. But then 3 months later, we got into our second deal. So did I fear change or did I fear loss? I feared the loss in the first one. But then after I did the first one, hey, it wasn't that big of a deal. What did I lose? I didn't fear the change. The second one came 3 months later. Really, really important point for everybody to listen to on the show right now.
And it could be real loss or imagined, and our brain doesn't know the difference, right? If I imagine
the story you're telling yourself, right? You're creating, this is what's going to happen to me due to this change, right?
Yeah. And so, and physically our brain doesn't respond differently, because our brain's wired to keep us in survival mode, right? Its job is to keep us alive. And so that's the thing that's challenging, is an imagined threat will feel physically just as exhausting as a real threat. And, because people will always say, oh, well, people fear change. Like, well, no, all three of us are different people than we were last week. We're different than we were a year ago. We're wearing different clothes. We're thinking different. Just as a result of this conversation, we will all leave a little bit different. We've changed. But that wasn't, I think you might appreciate this. One of the ways that I'll demonstrate this when I'm with a group is I give somebody money. And I'll just pull out like a $20 bill.
Are you like the Wolf of Wall Street or something? You just hustling people, or what is this?
No, but I give them a $20 bill, and I say, so let me ask you, was that scary? And people will be like, no. Well, but we said that people fear change, but your situation just changed. You have $20 now that you didn't have before. Why? Right? And then we unpack and talk about well, it wasn't significantly impacted. It didn't impact me negatively, right? Like I could choose to keep it or not, and it was a positive impact. And so even for you, if you're feeling that, you're feeling resistance or you're noticing, there's some loss, and it's not our job to agree with it. But again, going back to curiosity, how can we understand it?
If you want to give me $20, I'll feel giddy.
I was gonna say 2 points. Number one, you gotta give me $100. $20 is not gonna do it.
Oh, look at you!
I can't even feel the gas tank anymore. And number two, Jake's always wearing the same clothes. You're always wearing the same clothes. You said there's change. People are wearing the same clothes as last week. He's still wearing the same shirt he wore last week. So I don't believe that. So
it depends on the person.
Your own personal preference, but when it's comfortable and it looks good, why change it?
That's Jake right there, bro. He's got the different colors. Looking good.
Even I've got the diet, so it's the exact same thing every day leading up to dinner. It's made things a lot easier. Call me boring. Sure. What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
So. All right, gang. Let's take a quick time out here from our sponsor.
Are you looking for ways to improve your life?
Here at Jake and Gino, our mission is to empower students through financial education and the vehicle of multifamily investing.
Yes, Jake. We agree that a person with financial intelligence can change the world for the better.
We've created our proprietary 3-step framework, buy right, manage right, and finance right, that we teach to our community. This framework, along with education, our one-on-one mentorship, on-site boot camps, and the amazing community, has propelled our students to massive success.
We've all been there. We've had so many students that have been able to shift their mindset, overcome limiting beliefs, and set a clear path to achieve their goals. Whether you're currently fixing and flipping, wholesaling, or buying single-family rentals, and you know that multifamily investing is the right vehicle for you, I encourage you to visit jakeandgino.com/apply to schedule your complimentary consultation with our team. And I want to let you know this isn't a high-pressure sales call. It's really just a discovery call to get to know each other better and see if we're a good fit for working together. And if for any reason we're not a good fit, our team has tons of resources we will share with you to help you along your journey.
If you're ready to stop spinning your wheels, go to jakeandgino.com/apply and schedule your call now. All right, we are back. Love finding out about people's habits. Is there any habit that you do on a daily, weekly basis that has contributed to some of the success that you've seen in your life?
Yeah, this is going to sound really strange.
It may or may not. What kind of weird guy?
I don't know. But I'll tell you. Here was the first thing that came up.
Yeah,
is I picked up the accordion, and I want to connect what it has to do with my success. So I have ADHD, which means that it's really hard sometimes for my brain to settle and to focus. And what I realized is that playing this instrument is one of the ways that I can create self-care for myself, because it forces my brain to focus in a way that it doesn't normally. And so it has become one of the most important practices of my self-care, which then when I'm good, then I can show up in my business good. I can show up for my team good and my clients good.
I really believe most entrepreneurs are probably diagnosed with ADHD, and they don't.
Oh, yeah.
I was never diagnosed. My brain does not stop. I mean, I am busy.
Mhm.
I cannot shut it down. I can control it. I can really get hyper focused, but it's a difficult challenge. And you have, working and doing these things is what keeps me I don't want to say under control, but I mean, people say, oh, I just hang out and sit on the couch. I can't do that. I've got to be doing
Yeah.
something all the time.
Yeah, like we gotta
Yes,
move.
all the
It-
time.
True story. When I was diagnosed, my therapist, because I was diagnosed right
How old
as
were
I
you?
was starting, I was diagnosed 4 years ago, so 36. My therapist said that most adults who weren't diagnosed as children get diagnosed in the first 2 years of entrepreneurship because they've lost all the external like guardrails that existed in an internal company. And now it's like, this is like, why can't I keep my stuff together? Why am I all over the place? All of that. So most people will get diagnosed when they start their own business and they realize like, why is this so much harder now? But it can be really magical when we get into that hyper focus mode.
Mm-hmm.
So you play your instrument, and what does it do for you?
It does a couple of things. One, I mean, to that point of, I mean, I assume, right? Like when you run a business, you're thinking about it 24/7, right? I feel like I wake up sometimes and my brain is mid-thought. It does a couple of things. It helps me settle my brain just so it can focus on one thing. It is an instrument that connects me to my parents. And so that brings a lot of joy for myself. I also just think it's fun. And so after a hard day, it's just brings some like joy. I don't like playing for other people. So I just play for myself. Yeah.
It's like a peace of mind, a calming effect, an enjoyable, component of your life, ultimately.
And also, something I hadn't thought about until this moment, as you're asking these questions, is, sometimes our work is so never ending. Like there's always something that it feels nice to have something that feels like an accomplishment or a sense of completion. Like, oh, I learned that song, or I can see the progress sometimes in a way that you might not in your business. I mean, you see the progress, but it's like emails and clients and prospects, and you're just on this never ending cycle. And something I hadn't realized is there's something really comforting to just be able to be like, and I mastered that. And now I can move on to the next thing.
Like that. Any book recommendations, anything you've read recently or in the past few years that you want to share to add value to the folks' life out there?
Yeah, a book that has had a really big impact on me personally. I mean, there's two books. One is it's called 4,000 Weeks. It's Time Management for Mortals. The author's name is escaping me right now.
What 4,000 weeks? What does that relate to?
Yeah, that if we live to be 80, best case scenario, we'll have 4,000 weeks of our life. And so what was so provocative for me was this idea of, it wasn't that it was
seem like much when you put it like that, does it?
Exactly the point. And the idea, exactly the idea that as humans, one of the things that makes us unique is we have an unlimited capacity for imagination, and we live in a world with unlimited possibility of experiences. And yet as humans, we have this incredibly finite amount of time. And one of the practices that this gentleman who was like studied all these different time management kind of fell onto this was, the reality is there are going to be people you will disappoint. There will be balls that you will drop. There will be things you just can't get to or won't have the time to, but can you be really intentional about which ones you're okay disappointing and who you're not okay with? And that was a really big shift for me from a standpoint of developing a better relationship with my rest, was being okay with that.
What project are you excited about right now?
We're in a growth period as a company. And so we're in this transition of moving from the company being about like me as the person, and we're in this big shift to making it about our services and our practices. And so it's like my heart kind of beats a little bit when I think about it. I'm really excited to see where we're going to go. And so it's really fun to be in this place to be scaling and growing in a way that's bigger than me. So I'm just so excited about that.
Are you coaching with any scaling coaches or any scaling up right now? Are you currently engaged in any of that?
Yeah. I've got a whole arsenal of people that have my back. But if you have people to recommend, I never turn down an introduction.
Oh no, we did EOS, we did scaling up. I think I like scaling up a little bit better. I know there's the other guy. Who's the Dan guy that's out there, Gino, that does it? Dan Sullivan.
Oh yeah,
he does it.
Yeah,
strategic coach.
Yes.
Yeah. I think I like scaling up. I think that was my favorite. I think it helped our business quite a bit. We spent a lot of time into it, but I think you're at that. Sounds like you're at that kind of inflection point when it's time to we gotta figure this out, get it kind of ironed out, because it can't just be about you. You need to be a well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
So
yeah. It's like you move from being, in my world anyway, which is different than your world. Yeah. Sometimes you start and you're the product, and then you become the face that like sells the product, and then the product steps on its own. And so I'm excited to start to shift into that place, just to have bigger impact. Yeah.
Well, cool. So if folks are out there and they say, hey, would love to get some of that impact, how can they get a hold of you? What's the website, et cetera?
Yeah, you can check us out on our website, sarahnollwilson.com. I'm sure you'll put in the show notes, NOLLWILSON. And my colleagues and I work with an amazing group of people, and we have amazing coaches, and we're just very much committed to how do we have the conversations we're avoiding with ourselves and with other people, right, to do the work that we want to do and we're meant to do. And
all right,
also
Gino,
social media. My DMs are always open as well, so that's another way to connect.
Drop in the DM, folks. There you go. She's going to answer it. So no avoidance.
It might take me a minute.
No avoidance. Take us home, Big Cat.
You want to give me a minute to recap this, Jake?
Take as much time as you want. It's your show.
Okay. Let me see. Che bella
here we go.
Una giornata in sole, un'aria serena dopo una tempesta, per l'aria fresca pareggia una festa, che bella cosa una giornata in sole. She was a theater major. Went to work in Iowa.
I wasn't expecting that today, were you?
I am fulfilled in a way that I wasn't expecting. Thank you. That is a gift.
I am not done yet. I still have to recap the whole insurance thing from insurance in Iowa. She's like, I got ADHD. I don't want to do this. I need to become an entrepreneur. I need to get my message out. I don't want to feed the damn elephants. I don't want to kill them either. I just don't want to let them in the room. If they're in the room, how do I get them out of the room? That's the mission. The mission is to actually become curious. Some people are violently polite. Never heard that before. Maybe I can be that way sometimes. Just get to the subject, But at the same time, when you're a leader, you need to see things through other people's lenses. If you want to lead, you need to be the last person that speaks. You need to be the person who gets rid of the elephants, who becomes the most curious person in the room. And I will guarantee you, once you become responsible and you become the most curious person in the room, you'll become an amazing leader out there. So just want to take the time to thank you for being on the show, for writing an amazing book, and for taking your business to the next level, Sarah. Thank you.
Thanks for having me and for the great conversation and the song.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Sarah. Bye, everybody.